My name is Spencer Snyder. Welcome to Breaking News. This month, a group of 48 tired Venezuelan migrants were deceived, put on a plane to Massachusetts, and left stranded on Martha's Vineyard. The right is talking about this as much as the left, and I wanted to take a little time to highlight how the right takes just a deplorable incident like this and turns it into another vehicle to showcase their insane fears about immigration and about being replaced. And to do this, I'm going to focus on this last week of Breitbart coverage. I'm also going to touch a little bit on how Breitbart is just a glorified content farm.
You're now headed to political oblivion.
Breaking news.
The reporter must be able to think clearly. This sucks.
Exactly.
So first, to recap what actually happened, because being reminded of the cruelty of the episode is going to make it easier to place the cruelty of this coverage. I haven't slept well in 3 months, said Lionel, who does not have any relatives or friends in the United States. It's been 3 months since I put on a new pair of pants or shoes. Lionel, 45, said he had left Venezuela about 3 months ago, crossing the roadless Darien Gap between Colombia and Panama and making his way north through Central America and Mexico. His first attempt at crossing the US border failed. During his second attempt at Piedras Negras, Mexico, he made it across the Rio Grande. Lionel spent several days in immigration detention before being released in San Antonio. Migrants have said in interviews that a well-dressed woman in San Antonio who introduced herself as Perla offered to take them to sanctuary in Massachusetts. The lawyers representing the migrants allege that others approached them as well. The complaint states that the migrants were given a shiny red folder that included a brochure titled Massachusetts Refugee Benefits and other official-looking materials that were created by Florida officials, not Massachusetts officials. Before the flight, the complaint states, the migrants were told that they were going to Boston or Washington, D.C., but before landing, they were told of their new drop-off location. The complaint states, an island south of Cape Cod. Mr. DeSantis' office took responsibility for the flights the following day. The complaint states that Florida spent about $615,000 chartering the planes.
Accounts from the migrants who arrived last night make it clear that they were lied to again and again and fraudulently induced to board the planes. They were told there was a surprise present for them and that there would be jobs and housing awaiting for them when they arrived. This was obviously a sadistic lie. Not only did those responsible for this stunt know that there was no housing and no employment awaiting the migrants, they also very intentionally chose not to call ahead to any single office authority on Martha's Vineyard so that even the most basic human needs arrangements could be made. They were provided with a cartoonishly simple map of Martha's Vineyard and the United States, and a brief brochure containing snippets from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts website and instructions to change their address with USCIS when they relocated. As anyone with even the most basic understanding of the immigration proceedings knows that USCIS was not the agency with whom the migrants would have to record their addresses and has nothing to do with their cases in any way.
So these people, after this grueling trip from Venezuela, traveling through half a dozen countries, apparently at least one of these people was robbed at gunpoint somewhere along the way. And the desperation you must be experiencing to leave your home and country to commence a journey that will take months and not even really have a definite destination. Then your reward is getting tricked and flown to Martha's Vineyard to be stranded. That is brutal. Yet despite this, you have a right wing that is either indifferent or actually wants to author similar misfortunes, which at this point should be surprising to no one. And where you have people willing to do something as awful as lie and strand a bunch of exhausted migrants in various parts of the country, you will obviously have people ready to defend it, and also offer an astonishingly simple version of it. In Breitbart, they publish about 5 things tagged with immigration a day, and this week they ran 15 or so headlines having to do with the Martha's Vineyard stunt. Less than 48 hours after their arrival, officials on Martha's Vineyard declared a humanitarian crisis and claimed they have a housing crisis that prevents them from being able to absorb border crossers and illegal aliens, even as the island could shelter 6 million refugees. Okay, hold on. This person wrote that Martha's Vineyard could shelter 6 million refugees. The island has, I think, 20,000 residents. How did they come up with 6 million? From another Breitbart article, where the author calculated that based on how big the island is, you could fill it with buildings, pave over people's giant estates, replace the golf courses with affordable housing, things I'm not necessarily opposed to doing, and you could fit 6 million people. So, the claim that Martha's Vineyard could shelter 6 million refugees today is clearly false. To house the 50 illegal alien arrivals, residents only needed to open just 5 Martha's Vineyard homes, so long as each could sleep 10 guests. A central theme in this whole ordeal, and an apparent justification for shipping these people to Martha's Vineyard, is identifying the hypocrisy of liberals. And here, it's the hypocrisy of individuals not rushing out to the scene to invite these people to stay in their homes, as the city was scrambling to process these people and figure out where they should be and how to proceed. And apparently, people did take them in. The Reverend Chip Seedale said St. Andrews had decided to take in the migrants for the night after learning they had nowhere to go. A parishioner had reached out to him knowing that the church helps house homeless people in the winter. And of course, that is commentary on the perceived hypocrisy of liberals and not on the hardship of these migrants who are being tossed around the country to make headlines. I mean, shouldn't that be the focus? Obviously not if you're on the right. The experience of the migrants, right-wing media barely even pretends to care about, and mostly cynically if they do. Panic over DeSantis flying 50 illegal aliens to Martha's Vineyard comes as President Joe Biden has bussed and flown well over 1 million border crossers and illegal aliens into working and middle-class American communities since he took office in January 2021. For perspective, the arrival of 50 illegal aliens on Martha's Vineyard represents just 0.001% of the illegal immigration that American border towns have experienced since Biden became president. Obviously a false equivalence, and this is the other thing they drill down on, the sheer numbers. Obviously, there's a big difference between people relocating purposely around the country and people being intentionally stranded in random places, but it's these numbers that are repeated endlessly. 2 million border crossers since 2021. 5 million legal and illegal since 2 million migrants crossed border in fiscal year 5 million illegal aliens. 3 migrants for every 4 Americans who will be born this year. And all of that makes it easy to accept headlines like this. Carlson, the Great Replacement Theory was a conspiracy theory? It sounds more like a statistical fact. And clearly this is also that Democrats can win the votes of these immigrants, after a multi-year naturalization process, of course. As if Democrats had long game in them. Also, just think, even if the Democrats were magically effective enough to intentionally replace 100 million Americans with immigrants from around the world, they'd still figure out how to lose the midterms. By the way, that headline was just a transcript of that Tucker Carlson segment. It wasn't even original content. A lot of the content on their site is just republishing of tweets or quotes. There are pieces on Breitbart that contain basically no original writing, and pretty much everything on there is really short also. They post all day, but the average piece only takes like 2 to 5 minutes to read. But they all get shared, and they all have hundreds or even thousands of comments, and it's just wild what a chintzy impression of a news site this is, not only for the blatant racism it pushes, which obviously is bad enough, but for how much of it is just republishing and advertising. I've talked a lot about how advertising ruins media, but not usually how advertising ruins the experience of just reading the page. There are times when reading Breitbart that you scroll through an entire page of ads. It's kind of unbelievable, actually. I can't imagine what it's like to sincerely read this and constantly be fed the false anxiety that you're being replaced, while simultaneously being reassured that you're not a racist. In fact, Democrats are the racist. It must just break your brain. And I think that'll do it for me. You can follow me on Twitter or at my own channel. Just type my name into YouTube. If you like this content, please support Status Coup's investigative and on-the-ground reporting for as low as $5 a month. StatusCoup.com/join. A small percentage of people subscribe, so if you are able to be one of those people, it would go a long way to keeping this whole thing going. And I will see you next week.
You're now headed to political oblivion.
Breaking news.
Reporter must be able to think clearly. This sucks.
Exactly.